Good afternoon, everybody. Brian Neubert here from goldenblack.com, live. Where else? Once again, at home. I know what you're thinking. Hey, that guy's wearing the same clothes as he was yesterday. To which my response would be, don't you dare judge me. No, in all seriousness, shooting a couple videos today to post throughout the week. That way I don't have to wake up in the morning and you can see me at my most disheveled. But once again, to get this thing kind of moving forward here. This is your goldenblack.com Daily Quarantine Simulcast. Once again, this time for Wednesday. It is brought to you by our sponsors, Falls Purdue Bookstores, Purdue Federal Credit Union, the 6th Street Dive Restaurant, First Source Bank, East End Grill, and the Charters Team Remax Ability Plus. I want to remind you, of course, once again, that the 6th Street Dive Restaurant in Lafayette remains open for carryout orders, as do our longtime friends of the business, Arnie's and Bruno's. So if you're looking to support our local businesses, if you're just looking for delicious food, please keep the 6th Street Dive, Arnie's, and Bruno's in mind. Today's topic, I scribbled down a couple of thoughts here just to talk about the football offseason and what it might mean for Purdue. Obviously, the first question here is what the hell is the football offseason this year, the college football offseason? Nobody knows. We're going to have to wait and see. Hopefully, for all of mankind, some measure of normalcy resumes here within the next few weeks, the next few months. Worst case scenario, we can all leave our homes, rub our eyes, see the sun again, exist as people, as we are accustomed to existing. Worrying about the college football offseason is the ultimate first world problem. This is small potatoes relative to all that's going on in the world. People are losing their lives to this thing. We are sitting here talking about whether or not Purdue is going to be able to practice. But we have a Purdue website. Obviously, we talk about Purdue, so this is the issue we will talk about. Nobody knows what the college football offseason is going to look like. I know that there's hope for certain scenarios out there that things can get going again, like in June, July, almost like an NFL style of OTA, extended training camp sort of situation for some of the teams who might have missed spring ball or parts of spring ball. But we shall see. Obviously, nobody knows what's going to happen moving forward. What we do know is that this is going to be the most unconventional offseason probably in the history of college football. I don't want to say probably because I can't imagine there being any precedent for this kind of thing. How does this affect Purdue? I think obviously, clearly, something that has to be mentioned up front is everyone is dealing with the same issue here. Outside of players maybe working out in their garages, in their backyards, home gyms, whatever it might be, everybody is dealing with the same issue here. And there's very little opportunity for any sort of substantive off-season workout program, best I can tell. Purdue might be a little bit more affected by this than anybody else, generally speaking, I should say. One reason being, Purdue football is between strength and conditioning coaches right now. Not an ideal time to be making a hire either. So once this lifts, if there's any measure of off-season strength and conditioning program that teams can phase into, Purdue is still going to have to deal with whatever transition comes with going from one strength and conditioning coach to another. I do kind of wonder if, Purdue might promote from within on an interim basis or something like that just to keep a measure of continuity here, as opposed to having to go hire somebody right now, because clearly this is not the best time to be hiring a position that important. Also, this might be a smaller point to make, but I think it's worth mentioning. Purdue played a lot of freshmen this past season. Obviously, you're aware of the impact freshmen both were able to make, but also had to make because of all that went into this season and why Purdue struggled in terms of the injuries. Anytime you're in a situation like that, you really, really hope that those guys who are rushed to the field as true freshmen can make huge jumps between year one and year two, kind of buoyed by that experience. But also, I think it really matters to a young player in that part of his career to also be a little more physically prepared by virtue of having a full traditional strength and conditioning program season under their, I don't know what that means, under their belt, and the confidence that comes with feeling a little bit better physically. I think a lot of Purdue's issues at the line of scrimmage are kind of the key to Purdue's long-term success as a program. That's been true for many, many years. That's not a situation unique to this coaching staff or unique to this era of Purdue football. I think Purdue's offensive line obviously has to make strides, has to make significant strides. Purdue played a lot of inexperienced and younger guys there this year, and when you do that, you need that to pay out later on in those players' careers. You need them to get better. You need them to be more confident. You need them to be more comfortable. You need them to grow into being more physical. And I think the Will Bramels, the Eric Millers, etc., the guys who played very early in their careers as redshirt freshmen this year, I think this was a critical offseason for them, not only from a strength and conditioning perspective, not only from a strength and power perspective. People with the offensive line talk all the time about you have to be stronger, you have to be more physical. Purdue's issues on the offensive line were every bit as much tied to athleticism, mobility, agility, and whatnot as anything. It was really important too, or it is really important too, for those guys this offseason to get lighter on their feet, to get quicker, to get more athletic as best they can. Obviously, you're not going to transform into an entirely different player in one offseason, but the issues Purdue's offensive line, I thought, faced this past season were not issues that resolve themselves overnight. They resolve themselves over a matter of multiple off seasons. And when you take out an opportunity for value, for off-season value to be accrued, that's not a step in the right direction. Obviously, it's an issue for everyone in college football, but I think it's particularly acute potentially at Purdue. I think, Purdue's in a situation here at quarterback where you would like, the offseason is always important for a team to kind of coalesce around its quarterbacks. In a situation like Purdue's, maybe for a quarterback to separate himself from the other to whatever extent you can. During an offseason, spring ball was important to that extent. Purdue is going to be good if its quarterbacks are good. Purdue won't be good if its quarterbacks aren't good. I think that's probably oversimplifying things to a certain extent, but I think generally the history of Purdue football, coupled with what we know about what Jeff Brom wants out of a program, I think that it's safe to say that Purdue without good quarterback play is going to be it's going to be really hard for them to be good. That said, this is an important offseason in terms of either Jack Plummer or Aiden O'Connell establishing themselves as that guy. As I've said before, you potentially have a one-year window here of having Rondell Moore and David Bell playing alongside each other. Arguably the two greatest wide receivers in school history on the same team at the same time. You don't want to lose some of the value from that because your quarterback situation isn't necessarily what you want. This offseason would have been a good opportunity for those guys to build chemistry with everybody around them. It's an important offseason, too, for the quarterback position and a critical position for Purdue this season. That might be a little bit of a stretch in terms of talking about the offseason, but I do think it matters. The other part of this, too, is, and I think this is very important. Look, the biggest issue about the college football season and when it starts is how much time do you need to get teams up to speed, physically ready to play a college football season without the offseason having been what it traditionally is. That's a question that's going to be asked behind a lot of closed doors, behind a lot of open doors, or in front of, I don't know what that means. It's going to be asked a lot. It's going to be much discussed. It already is. What can be worked out here to where you know that you're going to go into a season with a team that's ready to go out there, healthy enough to go out there, and isn't going to get hurt a bunch. Player safety has to be at the forefront of everybody's mind here when you're looking at that specific to Purdue. Obviously, Purdue's coming off a season here where it was 4-8 for a lot of reasons, but the biggest of those reasons was the fact that they had just a cruel twist of fate in terms of their entire season, in terms of the litany of injuries that occurred. Right now, we don't have necessarily answers to these questions in terms of what Purdue's players recovering from injuries and surgeries, and there are a bunch of them. I know David Bell had off-season surgery, Jackson Anthrop. Obviously, Jack Plummer is coming back from the ankle injury. He's probably just about beyond that. I don't know. But is Purdue Purdue has to go into whatever this offseason is as healthy as it can, and it has to obviously go into the next season like everybody else, as healthy as possible. I do know that when I talked to Mike Babinski about things last week, he mentioned that players are being encouraged to stay where they are unless they need to be on campus for a very specific reason. One of those reasons obviously would be physical rehabilitation, recovery from injury, recovery from surgery. I don't think anything's going to compromise the care that these guys get, but obviously when you have the number of guys who came out of last season with injuries, Lorenzo Neal's another one to mention. His situation obviously was very complicated last year, but it's especially important for Purdue to come out of last season and go into next season, whenever that may be, as healthy as possible. And there's a lot of dynamics at play with the non-traditional nature of what this offseason is going to be that bring player safety, player health to the forefront. I know Purdue will do everything in its power to do what's in the best interest of its players physically, but it is one thing to keep in mind if this offseason doesn't bring what a typical college football offseason brings in terms of a team's ability to be in the best shape possible, both in terms of its actual health, but also its physical conditioning, as if those are two different things. It's just very important that Purdue gets out of this offseason as healthy and as ready to play and in the best situation physically it can possibly be in. And there's going to be a lot of complications to that this particular offseason. So something to keep in mind. Obviously, no one's going to do anything that puts the student athletes in danger of any kind, both at the NCAA level and the local levels. But it is something worth keeping in mind. The offseason shows up during the season in terms of potentially injury, in terms of players' conditioning, in terms of their ability to their durability, their ability to avoid injury. All sorts of things show up during the season that are the products of an off season. And without there being an off season necessarily as we know it, you wonder if that's going to show up as much during the season. The NCAA, the Big Ten, everybody involved, all of these stakeholders have to find answers to these questions, how they can best replicate a traditional offseason on a non-traditional calendar as possible once this question of when normalcy can resume is answered. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves talking about some of these issues because we don't know when these issues are even going to matter because we're still waiting, obviously, on the resumption of normalcy. But they are something to keep in mind as college football kind of sails into these uncharted waters. So that's kind of what I got. That's today's topic. For goldenblack.com, this has been your goldenblack.com Daily Quarantine Simulcast. And it's been brought to you once again by our sponsors, Fox Purdue Bookstores, Purdue Federal Credit Union, 6th Street Dive Restaurant, First Source Bank, East End Grill, and the Charters Team Remaxability Plus. Want to remind you once again, 6th Street Dive Restaurant, Lafayette, and our longtime friends of the business, Arnie's and Bruno's, remain open for carry-out business. If you're looking for dinner, if you're looking just to support local businesses, please keep them in mind. 6th Street Dive, Arnie's, Bruno's. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope everyone's doing well with all of this. I hope you're taking care of yourself and taking care of the people around you. This is breathing down all of our necks. As somebody who covers the Indianapolis high school basketball community to a certain extent, there's been some issues down there with folks passing away from COVID-19. As someone whose family lives in North Jersey, one of the hotbeds to this is obviously hitting a little close to home. This is breathing down all of our necks. Please do what you can to take care of yourself. Do what you can to take care of everyone else. You don't need to hear that from me, but everyone needs to hear it as much as possible because it's very important. Thanks, everybody. Take care.